This is Techzine Talks on Tour, the podcast about enterprise technology that brings you IT insights and analyses from events all around the globe. We cover everything, everywhere. Visit techzine.eu for more information, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast.
Welcome to Techzine Talks on Tour. I'm at an RSAC Conference in San Francisco, and I'm here with Perry Carpenter. Welcome to the show, Perry. You're Chief Human Risk Management Strategist.
I am.
You stressed me to call you that, right?
Yes.
That's very important. What does it actually mean?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I mean, it does sound like very pie in the sky.
Yeah.
And some of it is, right? Because human risk management, I think, is a concept that the market that KnowBe4 is in, which is the company that I work for, has been in for years. It's the natural evolution of the security awareness market. And it recognizes at its core that this is a human behavior type of discipline that we're thinking about. It's not about the number of eyeballs that can be put on screens or the amount of butts that can be put on seats. It's about actually driving behavioral change, which should be focused on reducing risk in an organization.
Yeah.
So
And how is that going in general?
Yeah.
In the past, let's say a year. I spoke to your former CEO, Stu, last year at the RSA Conference. What's happened?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like any vendor and anybody that's kind of in this evangelist role that I'm in, and media relations role that I'm in, there's a lot of education that has to happen for potential buyers, because like a CISO will look at a report and say, oh my God, 92% of data breaches trace back to some kind of human error. And they've been conditioned over decades to go to Google and the phrase they want to type in is security awareness.
Yeah.
But we know after decades, of course, and we've known this for a long time, awareness doesn't change behavior. I'm very aware of speed limit signs. I may or may not decide to follow them.
Yeah.
And I can even be very aware and intend to do something. Like I know the kinds of things I should eat and not eat. And I may do a New Year's resolution to say I'm going to work out X amount of days a week.
Yeah.
And I can write that on a list and really intend to do it. But in the moment, I make all these little decision behavioral trade-offs.
Yeah.
So awareness has never been the answer.
So we actually once recorded a podcast a long time ago, with that had the title was "Security Awareness Training is Nonsense," or maybe a little bit stronger word.
Yeah.
Which we're not going to repeat here. But that was more to trigger because we saw lots of stuff around, because awareness alone is not going to save us, right?
Yeah. Well, I even had a presentation. God, I think it's back 2012-ish, so 13 years ago, called "Move from Security Awareness to Security Culture Management," because I was realizing that there's behavior, there's social pressures, there's organizational dynamics. It's way more than just education. And I also had a quote back from 2015, I think, that said, the future of security awareness is real-time, learner-aware, context-dependent, kind of moving the needle towards what we think about when we think about agentic AI, human risk management platform. And now we're finally seeing that being realized within the way that the technology is entering the market.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to that later, but
Yeah.
at first I understand why you call it human risk.
Right.
But there are also voices in the industry that say, look, we should move away from seeing the human as the weak or the weakest link in the security chain. This kind of reinforces that image of human risk, doesn't it?
Yeah. So yes and no. I can see why somebody would make that argument. At the same time, we have to realize that humans are a critical layer within a security stack. And so I've never said humans are the weakest link. I know some people in this market have. Yeah. Humans are a critical layer, and what it recognizes is that humans are always going to be part of the security stack. And I would say if a human clicking on a link is the end of a company's security, then the company's not done a good job creating a security stack. Yeah. Because by the time the human is in the position to click the link. Secure email gateways failed. If they click the link and it causes damage, endpoint protection platforms have failed, application sandboxing platforms have failed, DLP has failed. There's tons of other things. So the human is not the weakest link unless all those other things are also the weakest link. The other problem is if a human clicking on something results in that human being penalized or seen as stupid or something else, that's absolutely wrong. Or let me say one more thing to finish the thought. If a human clicking on a link means that somebody in the organization will say awareness failed, that's also wrong, because they're not questioning the value in their firewall, endpoint protection, secure email gateway, or anything else. They're only questioning the value of that one human, which is stupid.
Yeah, and in a different way, it's the same thing as relying 100% on the security of your backups.
Yes.
Because I always say, or the security of your printers.
Right.
I always say, if people can get there,
yes,
then something else hasn't gone very well either, right?
Yeah, and so it's just human risk management recognizes the value of a human within the security stack, and it also recognizes the fact that every security program exists to reduce risk for an organization to an acceptable level for whatever the risk tolerance is. And so this is understanding where the human sits in that, and then being able to vector around that using a set of technologies and practices.
And let's try and break down the different kinds of human risk, right? Because when you talk about humans being fooled by something or being, there are different kind of things. You mentioned the phishing link, but there's deep fakes. There are many other kinds of things that may trick a user into doing something he or she shouldn't have.
Right.
So what are the main components of human risk?
Yeah, I mean, so what I would say is the main component that I think about when it comes to human risk is just the behavior. Anything, if a human doing something or not doing something impacts the risk or security of an organization, that is what we have to talk about. So it's always figuring out the intersection between the human and the technology. And there's tons of ways that could happen. That could be as simple as dealing with a phishing email or a deep fake, or it could be whether that person decides to put their document in the shredder or their trash can. It's a full spectrum, and we have to think about that the full way around as well.
But then you're not really thinking or looking at the technology that causes the risk. So I would imagine, looking at it from a relative outsider perspective, I would imagine that something like deep fakes is much easier to fall into the trap than, I mean, I'm just making up examples here, right? So there's because you're focusing it solely on the human part.
Right.
You're not really looking at the reason why, right? Is that on purpose?
The way I think about it is the technology behind the attack, or the technology behind the deception, is going to change and evolve constantly. Years ago we were thinking about phishing as kind of the primary attack vector, and now we've got a lot of SMS-based phishing, we've got voice-based phishing, and then now we have deep fakes that are taking the place of the humans in that. For me, the AI-ness is really, really interesting, but it does change the game in some ways, don't get me wrong. But I've gotten to the point where I don't care if something's real or fake. What I care about is it deceptive in some way? Is it trying to tell a story or get somebody to do or believe something? Because there's tons of, if I only focus on one, then I'm going to miss the other. If I only focus on deepfakes, I might miss the human-based type of.
I also wanted to point that out as well. So it's expanded into stuff like disinformation and other types of deception, which is not necessarily. I don't think a lot of people would consider that in the same realm as phishing links and deepfakes.
Yeah,
right?
I wrote a whole book about that recently. It's called Fake. It's spelled F-A-I-K because it's fake and there's AI in the middle. You know, trying to be clever. But it's only so clever if you have to explain it to lots of people.
Well, you didn't give me the chance to actually understand it.
Well, I preempted it for you. But so what I come back to in that over and over and over is that the AI-ness is really cool, and there's lots of interesting things that opens up. But at the core of it, the thing that it opens up most is just the ability for the attacker to work more at scale and more personally. And so if I can much more easily become your CEO, then that's fine. That's a piece of technology that allows a piece of synthetic media to be created and then lobbed over where the human has to deal with it. The human, at the end of the day, is still dealing with the same set of emotions and cognitive levers that they've always dealt with. And for them, what it comes back to is the training piece of this, or the cognitive defense piece of this, looks a lot like traditional phishing training. Yeah. It is realizing if there's an emotional backlash to the thing that I'm looking at. If it makes me really want to engage with it, like get angry with it or get afraid or feel rushed or something like that, well then at that point I need to stop and take a breath and go, why is this? What story is this piece of media or this thing that landed in front of me trying to tell? And what does it want me to do or believe?
But don't you think that different types or more subtle ways, or AI-ness, or whatever you want, so using AI to do this in a much more subtle way than the Nigerian prince trying to give you money.
Everything.
Don't you think that the thresholds inside a human's head are different for different kinds of, and that AI has lowered the threshold in a sense?
Absolutely. The way that I think about it is that every deceptive attack is a narrative attack. Right. So everybody has their own worldview, their own system of beliefs, their own things that will set their emotions off, and AI gives attackers who exist across this entire spectrum of sophistication. Mm-hmm. So a merely curious attacker that wants to try something out now can do stuff that a nation state would salivate at 5 years ago. Yeah. That's kind of where we are. Yeah. At the same time, we do have to realize that cognitively people are kind of in the same space, but that the reason that we respond to any kind of deception is because the piece of media that lands in front of us completes a narrative or tells a story, or is helping to tell a story. Yeah. It's an artifact that fits in and goes, because you've seen this, now you should click this thing, or you should transfer money, or you should, in the case of a piece of disinformation, you should vote for this certain person, or you should start a riot, or things like that. Yeah. So the subtleness of it is that at scale now, and with the right amount of research, and AI makes this possible too, you can create very weaponizable attacks that are very individual for each person and hit their cognitive levers in the right way. I mean, you're creating individualized cognitive malware with the right kind of AI-based attack.
Yeah, but so on the one hand, it doesn't change all that much fundamentally. Right. You still need to do the same things. Right. But on the other hand, it does change a lot as well, right? Yeah. Because you need to be more. Maybe we shouldn't use the word aware anymore, but you need to be more aware of what's what and when to. Because the example you gave, like if you have a certain reaction to something, realize why am I doing this? Right. But when something is very subtle, you may not even realize that you have this reaction, right?
True. Especially when it comes to things like disinformation, right? Yeah. So it's one thing to think in the corporate context, we typically get hung up on thinking about the email lands in the inbox, or the deepfake video comes in asking you to make a wire transfer. That's sometimes a one-time, not subtle ask of somebody, and it's using urgency, authority, fear, or something like that. It is. The other thing is the more persistent, smaller things that are meant to shift somebody's view in a different direction. And on social media, algorithms reinforce that quite a bit. you could weaponize that at the organizational level as well. And with one part of your attack slipping in and understanding what somebody's email patterns are, and then starting to build subtle messaging, taking on the persona of somebody, and then subtly shifting their behavior patterns in a certain direction so that they might give away information.
They're more like if you use the traditional nomenclature in security, those things are more like APT. So they're sort of persistent threats, right? They're not. They move gradually, and maybe they take 6 months to actually weaponize.
Yeah, it's kind of the long con approach, right? It's the subtle building of trust or understanding the behavior patterns or thought patterns.
But that's extremely hard to. If you look at it from a business perspective, from an organizational perspective, do you see stuff like that happening in there as well?
I've not seen it a lot. I mean, if I'm the cybercrime industry, I'm building towards that, right? Because the two of us think about security all the time, and we've talked about that already. I'm sure crime syndicates are thinking about and doing that right now. The thing is there's two pieces of this that we can do, or maybe three or more pieces that we can do as an organization. One is, and as much as some parts of the world don't like it, if you're doing email monitoring, sentiment analysis, and things like that, and you're doing behavioral profiling and understanding when a disruption happens, you have a good technical indicator that could then also alert into like a human risk management platform and say, based on this, we don't know for sure, but maybe this person needs a reminder about X. And then maybe you also send something to the HR team so they can redo a background check or something to see if there's some indicator in that person's profile that means that they're more likely to do something.
And that's also one of the reasons why KnowBe4 sort of went into the email security space as well, right?
So then the other thing is if you're pushing near-time or just-in-time awareness to somebody, you can give them that reminder of, oh, well, the policy is this, and you can kind of activate the cognitive dissonance a little bit more to where they feel that they feel more friction when they do something. And then lastly, again, because not everything is a single layer, you can activate either another piece of technology that might do some blocking and tackling, or you can advise the organization to put in a disruptive process, like a dual key mechanism or a secondary factor that's needed to, before we do this transfer, we've got to clear this through this department or this person. So it comes back to some pretty old school security concepts.
Yeah, but then you also get to the old school friction for people working for companies like with a lot of they're not particularly fond of stuff like this.
No,
right?
Sometimes you got to do it.
But that's also part of
the risk based, right? Yeah.
But that's also part of the behavioral stuff, right? So they need to understand that this is necessary.
Yeah.
And I think for some things, it's very clear, right? If you want to do something with personal information in some industries, you have to go to the office. You cannot do it. Then nothing can go via electronic, whatever it is. Some things are very clear, but if you run the risk, I think, looking at it from my perspective, you run the risk of overdoing this, and then a lot of people will be not very happy.
Yeah, and they could get frustrated, and they could also build side channels to do things.
Shadow
IT, shadow AI, all of that starts to become an issue. But if for the critical things, and I think every organization should think about and model the critical behaviors and the critical systems that are important. Because if through a side channel or a piece of shadow tech you can do something that materially impacts the business, then you have a gap that you need to close. And so you can threat model a lot of that stuff out as much as possible. And you have to decide like where friction is appropriate and where it's not appropriate. You could also subtly introduce friction based on behavioral indicators that you're seeing.
You can also use the gradual approach, right? And do one small step at a time.
Exactly.
Not in a malicious or pernicious way, but I mean to get people to.
Exactly. I mean, if you type your password wrong a few times, many systems will say, "Wait, we're going to give you a cool down period, so that you can start to think rationally again."
Well, that annoys me no end.
Oh, it annoys me to no end too, but I understand the behavioral insight.
Yeah, I understand why as well. But sometimes you're 100% sure you type the correct password and it still doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then your account is blocked for 24 hours. But I need it now.
Yeah. Well, a 24-hour block is pretty extreme, but like a 2-minute block or something enough to say, I wonder why that's happening.
Yeah.
That's a good cognitive defense, and if sometimes you need a piece of technology to get somebody to that point where they're not just reflexively hitting their head against the wall.
Yeah, because you need to, when you do something like that, you need to also support them in finding the solution.
Yeah, because if you're blocking somebody for 24 hours, you need to also give them an escape hatch, right? You need to say, if you need help with this, here's a button, here's a phone number, here's something, and you can get that fixed right away. But sometimes you're just also trying to save somebody from themselves, and that's why those extreme measures exist. I don't think that those are necessary most of the time, but I think they're a good example of things that we've seen that we can start to model other things after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly interesting, but how do you go about doing this as an organization? I mean, do you go...
Yeah.
You need to integrate it into your bigger stack, right? Otherwise, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Right. But then, what are some of the first steps that you can take to actually get this concept and this behavioral change into the people at your company?
So, there are multiple ways to do this, and realizing that I work for a vendor, I'm going to try to abstract from the vendor that I'm with and talk very kind of open for a minute. So the vendor community, us and others, will build and do have platforms that try to enable this, and that's through API integrations with third-party bits of a security or IT stack, so that you have behavioral, leading and trailing behavioral indicators about what's going on. You can start to make micro adjustments or even larger adjustments based on that. So that, I think, will be table stakes within this market. The other thing is there's always a last mile problem between what a platform can tell a user or tell an admin and some of those things happening. I mentioned before, like, how do you enforce behavior for using the shredder when you should? Some of that comes down to basic nudge theory and behavior science of trying to put those in convenient places, or put a sign up above the trash can that reminds people what should be shredded, and then also put the shredder right next to the trash can so people won't
have to
just
look
be
for
lazy.
where's the shredder again?
Yeah. So there's always ways to think about some of the disconnects between the cyber world and the physical world, and we have to enable people to do that. The other thing is agentic AI is going to continue to be a real thing, and we have to approach that in a smart way, and in a way that doesn't give into the hype, but creates a real future that's going to be valuable for organizations. And so KnowBe4, and I'm sure many of our other folks in this market are on that path right now. And we have a number of agents that we've already created that will do just-in-time training or do like policy quizzes that are very well refined and sophisticated, all the way through kind of real-time content creation. So basically anything that you can think that somebody might want to do from awareness or human risk management perspective, us and others are thinking about and will be bringing to market either right now or very soon.
And then who should have the responsibility of, specifically when you talk about agentic AI and agents that are doing this stuff, that are interacting basically with your people, who should be responsible for providing the guidance or for having the oversight, maybe an AI oversight kind of function or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the agentic AI world, there's this concept of an orchestrator. The orchestrator is kind of like the manager that sits over it and says, all right, based on what I'm seeing here, I believe we need to get this expert agent involved. And then there's back and forth communication between that. It works very much like a team. And then a human in the loop is going to be really important. So somebody to make sure that the orchestrator is actually doing the right things, that they're able to guide that. There's also another interesting thing that's going to happen is Anthropic, which is one of the large AI players, talked about the fact that we're going to see full-time AI employees within the next year.
Yeah.
Those AI employees can do the right thing and they can do the wrong thing. Like anybody else, they can be steered wrong. We know with large language models, you can social engineer the heck out of those as well. So how do you do security awareness training for an AI agent? And that's questions that we're asking as well. Do you have an agent or a set of agents that will be kind of scanning, understanding the threat landscape, and then either through like retrieval augmented generation, creation of documents that another agent can ingest and make more informed decisions. There's lots of pivoting around this new agentic ecosystem.
And how much room are you going to give them? How much leeway are you going to give them, right?
Exactly.
So they shouldn't become micromanagers, right? Because then people are going to hate them, and that's going to have the adverse effect. You don't want that.
Exactly. So
that's quite some fine tuning, I think.
It's a tightrope that us as a vendor and a lot of other vendors are going to have to walk and figure out. I'm sure that some people are going to make mistakes.
But would you say it is necessary? I mean, it is crucial to do it, because otherwise you're not going to be able to keep up with how fast everything is going.
And you can't have. I mean, you can build a solid agent that is doing the right thing for a certain time. At the same time, it's really hard for a threat model to encompass every type of thing that could go wrong.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to be thinking about, like, how do you sandbox an agent that's doing inappropriate behavior? How do you rehab those things, or how do you spin up a new one that's the 2.0 and 3.0 of those?
Mm-hmm.
Those are all things that the market is figuring out right now. I know if we're thinking about those, then others are as well.
Oh, 100%.
And it's a brave new world.
Well, I mean, and then you get into the automation part of things. I mean,
Yes.
that's adding another level of trust issues.
And different organizations have different levels of trust for any type of automation. There are some organizations that literally just want a button where you press that button and then a system will go off and do everything for them and will create nice, fancy reports. There are other organizations, usually large multinational organizations with lots of regulations, that want a human in the loop and human oversight over everything, to kind of be able to look over it and say, yes, I approve these types of things to happen. Looks like things are going right, and then they're just going to put a finger on the pulse from that point on.
Well, I mean, obviously the big question in that respect is if we will always have the luxury of keeping a human in the loop. I mean, if things are going faster and faster and faster, one of the logical conclusions of such a thought process would be that there comes a time that it goes when it will go too fast, and then you need full autonomy in your. But on the other hand, you could say, look, but you could also approach it from a different angle. I know, but I mean,
there's at least in the near term. And by near term, I'm talking within the next couple of years, while the world is figuring out the true path for agentic AI. A control level safety valve is going to be critical, because you can get into race conditions as well. You look back at the early stages of the self-driving car industry, and there was a situation where Waymo, and there's tons of Waymo cabs out here in San Francisco right now, they're doing really well. Early in that, one of the tragedies that happened is a Waymo car hit a race condition where somebody was walking a bicycle across the road, and the computer vision in the car knew what a person was, knew what a bicycle was, knew what a person riding a bicycle looked like, but had never been trained on somebody walking a bicycle. And so it was in this condition where it's going, that's a person, that's a bicycle, that's a person, and it hit analysis paralysis, and it also hit the person and killed them. And so there have to be ways and safety valves that will allow an organization using any type of agentic AI to say, there's this condition that for whatever reason nobody planned for, and now we gotta sandbox that thing, we gotta turn it off, we gotta do a new version.
But especially if you use agentic AI for security purposes, I mean,
Yeah.
you should be able to guarantee that it's secure, right? Otherwise,
Yes. There will be agentic AIs that get flipped and turned into insider threats.
Well,
There will, everything that we can think that would happen with a person right now will happen with an automated AI agent.
Yeah, well, that may not be the most uplifting end to this discussion, but
No.
but it is, right?
It's
true.
It's the truth that we're going to have to deal with as a society, and this is bigger than selling security awareness or anything else, because agentic AI is going to touch every part of everything that we do.
Yeah, I agree. It's just it's not the easiest problem to solve. Let's put it that way.
No, I mean, deep fakes are small in comparison, for sure.
Oh yeah, I think so too. All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank
Jurgen.
you.
I really enjoyed this, I hope to speak to you another time.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Techzine Talks on Tour. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. If you'd like more information, please feel free to visit techzine.eu, where we cover everything, everywhere. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us again on the next episode of Techzine Talks on Tour.